Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Professor Mandeep from Guru Nanak Dev University, Amritsar. Today we are going to talk on the module Industrial Policy from the paper Business Environment. After completing this module, you will be able to understand the concept of industrial policy. You will have the knowledge of various industrial policy of India till date, and you will be able to critically evaluate the new industrial policy 1991. The Indian economy was facing the problem of illiteracy, poverty, low per capita income, unemployment, and industrial backwardness, etc. at the time of independence. After attaining the independence in 1947, an effort was made to begin an era of planned industrial development. It led to the formation of rules, regulations, policies adopted by the government for the various industries. The industrial policy injected a substantial measure of competitive environment and market thrust to the industry. Many areas earlier reserved for the public sector are now open to the private sector participation. The restrictions on the expansion of large industrial houses have been removed. Licensing requirements for the industries have been abolished except for the strategic and other important industries. Industrial policy is basically an important document which sets the tone for implementing, promoting the regulatory roles of the government. It refers to the government's policy towards industries, their establishment, their functioning, their growth, as well as management. Industrial growth of the country is guided, regulated, and controlled by its industrial policy. Journey of various industrial policies. The first industrial policy resolution came in 1948, followed by industrial policy resolution of 1956, and then the next was in 1973. Then came industrial policy resolution of 1977, followed by industrial policy resolution of 1980, and then new economic policy 1991. The first policy, Industrial Policy 1948. It was announced on 6th April 1948 and the aim was to accelerate the industrial development. Here the policy divided the Indian industries into 4 categories. The first category included the industrial where the monopoly was of the central government, that is the manufacturing of arms, ammunition, railway and atomic power. Second category, exclusively monopoly of the state government. So 6 basic industries were included in this. That is for the development of infrastructure, shipbuilding, telephone, telegraphs and wireless apparatus, aircraft and manufacturing, coal, iron, steel and mineral oil. The third category included 20 industries owned by the private sector but controlled by the state. For example, tractor, rubber, sugar industry, paper industry, automobiles, fertilizers, machine tools, electrical engineering, heavy machinery, cement industry, newsprint, chemicals, sea transport and air transport, etc. The last category, which was exclusively it was done for the private sector. So the remaining industry, which were not covered under the previous 3 categories, came into this category. Another feature of this policy was that here the acceptance was given to both the private and public sector. That is why the industries were reserved for both the private and public sector. Moreover, small and cottage industries were given important role in the industrial development. These industries are particularly suited for the utilization of local resources and for the creation of employment opportunities. The last feature of this policy was that the role of foreign capital in industrial development was recognized, but the need for regulating and controlling it according to the needs of domestic economy was very much essential. So, it was stated that in those industries where the foreign investment was to be done, Indians should have a major share in the ownership and management. Industrial Policy Resolution 1956. This policy came after the 5-year plan, that is the first 5-year plan, where the objective was the social and economic policy development and the socialistic pattern of society. The policy was announced on 30th April 1956. The major features were new classification of industries, non-discriminatory and fair treatment for the private sector, promotion of the village and small-scale industries to achieve the development by the removal of regional disparity and labor welfare. The objectives stated under this policy were to accelerate the rate of economic growth and to speed up industrialization, to expand the public sector and develop the heavy-end machine-making industry, to increase the employment opportunities and improvement of living standards of people, to prevent the creation of monopolies and concentration of economic power, to reduce the existing disparities of income and wealth, to build up a large and growing private sector, to expand the cottage, village and small-scale industries, and to achieve the balanced industrial development. So the policy divided the industries into 3 categories. Now these 3 categories were Schedule Industry, Schedule B Industry and Private Sector Units. The first category, Schedule A Industry, covered 17 industries including arms and ammunition and allied defense equipment industry, atomic industry, iron and steel, heavy casting, heavy plant and machinery, etc. The second category, that is Schedule B category, it included 12 industries in which all other minerals except those were defined under the Section 3 of Mineral Concessional Rules 1949 were covered. Moreover, ferroalloys and toils, drugs, fertilizers, synthetic rubber, coal, chemical, pulp, road transport and sea transport were covered under Section B. And the third category, private sector, the rest of industries were open to the private sector, but this did not prevent the state from starting any new undertaking in this sector. Let's discuss now the Industrial Policy 1973. Industrial Policy Statement of 1973 identified high priority industries where the investment from the large industrial houses and foreign companies were permitted. The basic features were: the new policy was directed towards removing these distortions. It provided for the closer interaction between the agricultural and industrial sectors. Highest priority was given to the generation and transmission of power. An exhaustive analysis of industrial products was made to identify the products which are capable of being produced in the small scale sector. The list of the industries reserved for the small scale sector was expanded in order to give more impetus to the indigenized industries. Special legislations to protect the cottage and household industries was introduced. Moreover, compulsory export obligations merely for ensuring the foreign exchange balance of the product would no longer be insisted upon while improving the new industrial capacity. Industrial Policy 1977. In the year 1977, a new industrial policy was announced by George Fernandez, the then Union Minister in the Parliament, The major features were the target on development of small-scale industries, that is the household and cottage industries for the self-employment. Tiny sector investment was up to 1 lakh. Small-scale industries were set up with an investment from 1 to 15 lakhs. As far as large-scale sector is concerned, the areas covered in the Industrial Policy 1977 were the basic industries, that is infrastructure and development of small-scale and village industries, capital goods industries, that is meeting machinery requirement of cottage industry. In case of high technology industry, development of agriculture and small scale industries like pesticides, fertilizers and petrochemicals were included. To restrict the control of big business houses was another objective under this policy. As far as the role of public sector is concerned, the promotion of essential goods for the consumer was objective. Development of ancillary industries to make available expertise in technology and management in the small and cottage industries. Moreover, revival and rehabilitation of sick units was another objective under this policy. Now let's discuss the Industrial Policy 1980. The Congress government announced this policy on 23rd of July 1980 with the major features, that is the promotion of balanced growth, extension and simplification of automatic expansion, taking over industrial sick units, regulation and control of unauthorized excess production capabilities installed for industrial houses, redefining the role of small-scale units, improving the performance of public sector. Now, all the industrial policies till now, they were framed under the regime of controlled restrictions. Now we shall discuss the new industrial policy 1991, which came at the time of LPG, that is liberalization, privatization and globalization. Industrial Policy 1991, which is also known as New Industrial Policy. Congress government, the then Prime Minister of India, P.V. Narasimhan Rao, announced the new industrial policy in July 1991, and this policy has changed the economy to the large extent. LPG, short form for liberalization, privatization and globalization. This was the era when this new industrial policy was announced. The major objectives: liberalizing the policy regarding FDI, that is foreign direct investment, incentives for the industrialization of backward areas, redefining the role of public sector, bringing of welfare schemes for the Indian industries, removing the restrictions which were imposed by FERA on the international trade to ensure the quality standards, emphasis on the research and development capabilities, enhancing the support to the small scale sector, improving the productivity of the Indian industry to prepare Indian industry to be globally competitive, and moreover, integration of Indian industry with the world. Major initiatives of new industrial policy. First one, abolishing industrial licensing. For liberalizing the economy, the need was felt to abolish the industrial license except 18 industries that required compulsory licensing. These 18 industries were coal and lignite, petroleum, sugar, animal fats and oil, cigars and cigarettes of tobacco and manufactured tobacco substitutes, motor cars, paper and newsprint, defense equipment, hazardous chemicals, drugs and pharmaceuticals, entertainment electronics, white goods, tanned or dressed fur skins, asbestos and its based products, distillation and brewing of alcoholic drinks, raw hides and skin and leather, industrial explosives, plywood and other wood-based products. With the passage of time, this list was reduced to 14 and then to 9, later to 8 and now below 5 industries, which include cigars, cigarettes of tobacco and manufactured tobacco substitutes, hazardous chemicals, drugs and pharmaceuticals, electronic, aerospace, defense equipment, and industrial explosives, including detonating fuses, safety fuses, gunpowder, and matches, etc. The role of public sector. In spite of huge investment, public sector was not performing good. So the need was felt to redefine the role of public sector. The number of industries reserved for public sector was reduced, and these were reduced to number 6 only. These 6 industries were defense products, mineral oil, atomic energy, railway transport, coal and lignite, and mineral. As far as foreign investment is concerned, earlier it was necessary for every industry to take the prior approval of the government, which led to unnecessary delay, and sometimes due to frustration, foreign investors did not invest to promote the export of Indian goods in the world market because the approval was required. Now, in this particular policy, FDI up to 51% is allowed in high priority industries. MRTP Act. New Industrial Policy 1991 removed the threshold limit of assets in respect of MRTP companies. This eliminates the company for prior approval of the central government for the expansion, establishment of new industrial undertakings and merger, etc. Next is the foreign technology. According to this policy, the automatic permission for foreign technology agreement in high priority industries up to Rs 1 crore is allowed, 5% royalty for the domestic sales and 8% for the export. Moreover, no permission is required for hiring of the foreign technicians. Convertibility of rupee. The new industrial policy for the year 1991 has given the privileges to the industrial regarding the import of raw material and technology. The new policy has introduced a rupee convertibility on current account as well as on capital account. The government made the current account fully convertible, while under the capital account, the repayment of loan and the depreciation of assets has been made convertible. Further, under the previous provisions, the financial institutions extending loans to the industrial houses had an option to convert the 20% loans into equity. It was a major threat to the industries in posting threat to their positions. Under the new industrial policy 1991, such as compulsory clause of conversion of loans into equity has been abolished. Reservation for small-scale industries. In the year 2006, small-scale units were defined as a unit having investment of 5 crore in plant and machinery. In October 2008, 21 items were reserved for the manufacturing in the small-scale industry so that they could develop. Next is the encouragement to industries in the backward areas. Government has taken various measures to encourage the industries in the backward regions. Various incentives were offered by the government to the industries who are establishing themselves in the backward regions for reducing the regional disparities like tax holidays, etc. Freedom from administrative control. Expansion programs launched by the government were exempted from administrative controls, and already existing units were made free to produce any commodity on the basis of the license they had already got. Now let's discuss the appraisal of this new industrial policy. That what are the positive and what are the negative aspects of this policy. Positive aspects. Building of competitiveness in Indian industries. It has opened the industries for the private investment that were previously reserved for the investment by public sector only. So the new industrial policy was also liberalized, and the location norm and the import of technology was freed from the government restrictions. Moreover, the procedural delays have been removed, leading the reduced cost of the project. Second positive aspect was the attraction of FDI. In high priority industries, no prior approval of the government was required up to 51%. Import of technology in India, automatic permission in high priority industries was there to remove unnecessary delays. Development of global quality standards in India, shifting of quality standard from Indian standard industries and international standard organization. Removal of MRTP Act. Removal of the restrictive conditions of MRTP Act like pre-entry scrutiny of investment decision by MRTP Commission, prior approval of Center for Expansion and Establishment of New Undertakings. As far as negative aspects of industrial policy are concerned, the more weightage to the foreign investor was given. The new industrial policy has laid more emphasis on FDI in India. In fact, the FDI is considered as a panacea of all the socio-economic problem of the country. It has been decided to provide approval for direct foreign investment up to 51% of foreign equity in high priority industries. 34 higher priority industries having provisions for automatic permission for FDI would make it possible for the large multinational companies to dominate certain growing areas of our country. It was argued that if the same amount of incentives and concessions are being provided to the indigenous industrial houses, then the better results could be expected without taking any risk of foreign capital. Secondly, exploitation of domestic resources. The natural resources are limited in the country. Each country of the world, either developing or developed, intends to make optimum use of available resources for the overall growth and development of the country. The critics of new industrial policy are of the opinion that the provisions of huge foreign capital in the country will lead to wastage and even misuse of resources available within the country. The multinational companies having huge marketing and financial resources, they have the latest technologies and huge production capacities, so they will utilize the natural resources to produce the products belonging to even non-priority categories because they wish to serve the world market. It leads to the earlier depletion of available resources of the country. Thirdly, threat to environment. The environmental laws in the developed countries of the world are very, very strict, and their violation leads to harsh consequences for the industries. On the other side, the environmental laws in the developing and the least developed countries and their implementation is ineffective. Further, the developing countries are the victims of corruption, favoritism, and other malpractices. That is why it is going to impact the environment of the country. Reduction in the growth of production of industrial goods. The most negative indicator of the new industrial policy goes against the sudden fall in the production of industrial growth. In the initial years of liberalization, the growth of industrial goods has shown very, very negative and meager growth. Moreover, the critic says that the government has given no clear-cut policy for the SIC units. The government has not announced even the exit policy for those units, so they are always under the pressure of the trade unions. The new industrial policy says that offloading of 20% equity in profit-making public sector units to the mutual funds, it will be basically a revenue-raising exercise rather than an attempt to the privatization. Some critics also say that though many regulations have been scrapped, the expected foreign investment may not come through because there are many infrastructural deficiencies in the country. That is why the foreign investors may not come to invest in India. In short, we can say that this policy was drafted because of the pressure of IMF, which means simply surrendering of the economic sovereignty of the country to the foreign agency. The recent changes in industrial policy after this 91 policy, that in so many sectors the automatic approval was available. More than 74% FDI in advertising sector was allowed. Up to 100% FDI in film industry was allowed, and recently the government has announced 100% FDI in case of defense and insurance sector. There are certain suggestions given by economists for the effectiveness of industrial policy. That is the effectiveness of private sector. That the private sector need to be work more effectively and efficiently in order to develop the country. Secondly, enhancing the profitability of public sector units. Public sector units are meant for the public welfare. In any country like India, where the mixed economy is operating, both public and private sector coexist. Hence, the sick public sector units need to be revived in order to increase their profitability. More incentives should be given. Development of infrastructure is must so that the foreign investors who wish to invest in India, they get attracted and invest more in India for the development. Next one is not too much dependence on the technology. Rather, we need to develop our small scale enterprises too. So the proper attention should be given to the indigenous industries for the overall development of the economy. Setting up the units in backward areas for the balanced regional growth, more and more incentives should be given to the industries who are coming to invest in the backward areas and in the industries where the gestation period is more. Lastly, the support to the domestic industrial units for their expansion should be more rather than more and more profits to the foreign industries. Let's now discuss the industrial policy of 2010-15. The government announced the new industrial policy for 2010-15, enhancing the investment limit of mega projects, that is from rupees 100 to rupees 250 crore for the purpose of offering benefits to them. For micro and small industries, the investment subsidies was increased from rupees 15 lakh to rupees 20 lakh. In case of women entrepreneurs, not only 10% of the plots in the industrial area, but also 5% additional subsidy was offered subject to the minimum of rupees 5 lakh. Another major objective or the feature of the policy was to attract investment in the industry, that is the service sector. Maximizing employment opportunities, implementing self-employment schemes effectively, and providing jobs to the local people in the upcoming industrial units in the states. For example, Pradhan Mantri Employment Generation Program was launched by the Government of India. Promote agro-based food processing industries to make agriculture a more profitable proposition and to make India self-sufficient. In order to ensure the productive uses of land, multi-storied complexes, even for the micro and small entrepreneur and small industries, was to be constructed either through the department's corporation or through the private sector participation at the potential sites. So students, let's now summarize what we have learnt in this module. This topic is very dynamic in nature. A metamorphosed change has come up over the period of time when we trace the history. Initially, the focus of the industrial policy was to give impetus to the industry and to ensure balanced regional growth through active participation of the state. The priority was on heavy industry development through more emphasis on the public sector. However, with the advent of globalization and liberalization, the industrial policy has also changed its focus, and as such, the emphasis changed to liberalization and privatization of the industry, and more initiatives have taken to attract the foreign investment in the country. Thank you.